Peppa and the shared lunch. Today, there's a new friend, Wendy Wolf, who forgot her lunch.
Hey!
Peppa looks at her 2 sandwiches and thinks of Wendy sitting quietly. Let's share, says Peppa. Wendy smiles happily. Everyone shares their food. The playground fills with laughter. Madame Gazelle smiles. Sharing warms both the heart and the tummy.
Peppa Pig and the giant truck. Peppa and George's peaceful morning suddenly disappears as a giant truck appears right in their backyard. The truck isn't just big, it's filled with strange things no one knows how to use, and Peppa loves strange things. George tries to push the giant wheel, but it turns out the wheel is bigger than George's plan. Peppa believes driving a truck is just like driving anything else. There's only one tiny problem. The truck doesn't listen to Peppa. And then, oops, one little push on the gas, and the giant truck starts an unplanned adventure. Finally, the truck stops. Peppa and George learn that the most memorable fun often starts with things that are way too big. Peppa Pig and the strange noise in the garden. The garden is calm and quiet until a strange rustling sound comes from the bushes.
Hey! Hey!
The noise isn't loud, but it's curious enough that Peppa and George can't ignore it. Peppa bravely moves closer, while George chooses a safer spot behind her. It turns out the sound was just the wind, but Peppa and George aren't fully convinced yet. And then, the loudest noise in the garden comes from George stepping on a dry leaf. Peppa and George learn that sometimes the scariest things are just in our imagination.
Peppa Pig and the Rainbow Slide. In her dream, a giant rainbow appeared across the sky. The rainbow turned into a sparkling crystal slide. George slid down first, laughing, while Peppa waved and followed. Mommy Pig and Daddy Pig joined, leaving trails of shining light. It turns out, Peppa was dreaming on the green meadow, her smile still shining. Oh, wait. Perhaps Peppa is still dreaming. Peppa and George were walking in the park when they spotted a small wooden bridge over a clear stream.
Wow!
Peppa stepped onto the bridge, but it wobbled a little, making her feel a bit uneasy. George stood behind, feeling a little worried. Mummy Pig walked up, holding their hands and gently reassuring them. Take it slow, don't worry. The 3 of them crossed the bridge together, and Peppa and George were excited to see sparkling stones in the stream below. When they reached the middle of the bridge, they paused, taking in the fresh air and enjoying the peaceful moment. Finally, the whole family stood at the end of the bridge, watching the flowing stream and surrounding trees, enjoying the simple joys of life. Peppa and George spotted a rolling wheel in the yard and decided the adventure started here. This wheel seems to never stop, and Peppa had to run fast just to catch up. Despite trying, George couldn't catch the wheel, but he could only laugh after every fall. The wheel didn't just roll fast, it also created a fresh breeze of flowers in the park. Finally, the wheel stopped, and Peppa and George realized that sometimes the best adventures are the simplest ones. And in the end, Peppa and George understood that sometimes letting things roll is the most fun of all. Peppa and George spotted a wooden bridge across a stream and decided to cross it. The wooden bridge seemed a bit wobbly, but Peppa is always the bravest one. Sometimes, even a leaf can throw off your balance, but Peppa never gives up. Halfway across, Peppa stops to admire the stream below, but George is worrying about her safety. The bridge shakes a little, but Peppa crosses it successfully. Now it's George's turn. Although George is a bit scared, Peppa is ready to help him face this challenge. Peppa and George spotted a kite soaring high in the sky and decided to try flying their own kite. Peppa started running fast, pulling the kite up, but sometimes the wind just wouldn't cooperate. The kite flew high and spun around, making Peppa stumble. But George was ready to help. Together, they ran, keeping the kite stable in the wind. Finally, the kite flew high in the clear blue sky, and Peppa and George felt so proud. Although the adventure was a bit tough, Peppa and George knew that joy came from the simplest moments. One fine evening, Little Pig was sleeping soundly in his room. But as he closed his eyes and fell asleep, a strange dream began. The little pig opened his eyes and found himself at the bottom of the sea, surrounded by colorful fish and beautiful coral reefs. Little Pig wanders into an underwater garden where sea flowers are blooming and dancing to cheerful music. Oh! The baby pig swims like a little fish and can even surf like a superhero. Everything under the sea is fun and colorful. After a wonderful adventure, Little Pig felt a little tired and decided to return to the real world. The water world gradually disappeared, leaving behind a feeling of relief. Peppa is sick. Today is a beautiful day. But Peppa wakes up with a red nose and a few sneezes. It seems Peppa has caught a cold. The whole family prepares warm water, soft towels, and gently takes care of Peppa so she can recover quickly. Peppa is wrapped in a blanket, lying quietly on her bed. She feels a bit tired and can't run around like usual. Peppa is given a soft pillow behind her back. She relaxes, closes her eyes, and rests peacefully in her quiet room to help her body heal. Thanks to everyone's care, Peppa gradually feels better. Her nose is less red, her smile returns, and she's ready for new adventures. Peppa and the Sparkling Magic Wand. Peppa walks into the room, looking around curiously. A small wand sparkles on the chair. Peppa walks closer and touches the wand. The wand glows brighter. Peppa opens her eyes wide in surprise. Peppa picks up the wand and waves it gently. Magical bubbles appear. Peppa smiles happily. George runs over and looks at the magical circle. Peppa waves the wand again. Glowing magic circles appear. Peppa and George jump happily. The magic light slowly fades, and they both smile happily.
Peppa Pig and the Trash Can Race. Peppa and George discover old trash can vehicles in the yard and come up with a fun idea. Peppa jumps onto a trash can vehicle while George watches curiously.
Let's go!
The race begins. Peppa's trash can zooms ahead. George follows closely, both cheering happily. George accidentally crashes into a pile of toys, making Peppa giggle as she races past.
Yahoo!
The race ends with laughter as the whole family enjoys the moment together.
Aha!
Wow!
Huh?
Wow! Whoa!
Huh?
Yahoo!
Peppa Pig and the Giant Cookie. This morning. Peppa Pig and the Dancing Leaf. Peppa finds a big leaf in the yard and picks it up. George approaches as the leaf gently shakes.
Whoa!
The leaf twirls around and dances across the yard. They imagine following it into a sparkling garden.
Yahoo!
The wind settles, and they pick up the leaf with a smile. Peppa and the Little Paper Boat. After the rain, Peppa folds a paper boat.
Whoa!
She sets it on the puddle, and it begins to float. The wind makes the boat move around like magic.
Whoa!
Daddy Pig blows gently to make it go faster. The family relaxes together on the porch, talking about the boat's adventure. Peppa Pig learns to draw. Today, Peppa is learning to draw. She's so excited to make a beautiful picture. Peppa starts drawing a little house. Oh, how cute it looks! George wants to draw too. And of course, it's a big green dinosaur. Mummy Pig says both drawings are wonderful. Peppa and George giggle with joy.
Whoa!
What a fun drawing day! Peppa feels like a real little artist now.
Peppa Pig and the Endless Ladder. Peppa and George discover a ladder that seems to have no end. With each step, the ladder looks a little taller. It feels like the ladder is reaching for the sky. Even the ladder seems excited. Suddenly, it shrinks back to normal. Sometimes, imagination is the tallest thing of all.
Peppa Pig and the magical rain. It starts to rain, and Peppa and George watch the drops roll down the window like tiny mirrors. Mummy Pig brings out their raincoats and favorite muddy boots. To them, rainy days mean the best time to jump in puddles. They rush outside, splashing water everywhere, laughing as the puddles sparkle like mirrors on the ground. Suddenly, the sun peeks through the clouds, and a bright rainbow stretches across the sky.
Wow! Whoa!
Daddy Pig steps outside, looks up, and is amazed to see the rain has stopped and a beautiful rainbow has appeared. Peppa and George laugh joyfully, ending the magical afternoon.
Peppa Pig and the rolling chair. Everything is perfectly normal until a chair decides to move all by itself.
Oh!
Peppa puts the chair back where it belongs, but the chair clearly has other plans. George decides to sit on it, and the chair agrees, but only for a moment. Soon, the chair is no longer a chair. It becomes a very cooperative toy. And of course, everything in Peppa's yard eventually finds its way into a puddle. Peppa and George learn that sometimes the things that won't stay still bring the longest lasting fun.
Huh? Aha! Yahoo! Aha!
Peppa and the Flying Teddy Bear. Peppa hugs Teddy in her bedroom. George runs in with a bunch of balloons. Peppa looks at the balloons, then looks at Teddy, then gets an idea. Peppa lifts Teddy up and smiles happily. Peppa ties the balloons to Teddy. Peppa lets go to Teddy, starts to fly. Peppa and George are surprised and run after Teddy. Teddy floats up and gets stuck on a tree branch. Daddy Pig comes in, stands on a chair, and brings Teddy down.
2 hours later.
Peppa and George jump with joy. The whole family laughs happily.
Peppa Pig and the Giant Car. Peppa Peppa and George are surprised to see a giant car blocking their gate. The wheels of the car are even taller than Peppa. The huge car casts a long shadow over the garden. Inside, the car looks like a moving room. As the car slowly moves, the whole garden seems to shake. Peppa and George realize that sometimes the bigger something is, the more curious it becomes.
Peppa and George stood on the grass, seeing a big banner. Funny dance contest. George did a flip in the air, making Peppa laugh happily. Peppa tried dancing to the music, but slipped on a leaf, both of them laughing uncontrollably. Daddy and Mummy Pig stood beside them, clapping and cheering them on. Finally, Peppa and George received their medals, and the whole family hugged and laughed together. It was a beautiful sunny morning, and Peppa and George were playing in the backyard. Suddenly, George pointed up at the sky, where the stars sparkled brightly. Peppa smiled and nodded in agreement. The two quickly got ready. They put on their helmets and stepped into the shiny spaceship. The rocket blasted off, soaring through the fluffy white clouds and into the vast universe. They floated around joyfully among the stars. Peppa stopped on a bright orange planet, while George lay back on a soft pink planet, smiling as he gazed at the endless galaxy. Peppa and George spotted a rolling wheel in the yard and decided the adventure started here. This wheel seems to never stop, and Peppa had to run fast just to catch up. Despite trying, George couldn't catch the wheel, but he could only laugh after every fall. The wheel didn't just roll fast, it also created a fresh breeze of flowers in the park. Finally, the wheel stopped, and Peppa and George realized that sometimes the best adventures are the simplest ones. And in the end, Peppa and George understood that sometimes letting things roll is the most fun of all. Peppa looked out the window and saw the rain, water pattering on the roof. Mummy Pig gave Peppa and George their rain boots and coats.
Hey!
Peppa and George jumped in puddles, splashing water everywhere, laughing happily. Daddy Pig joined in, jumping into the puddles with Peppa and George. The family jumped across many puddles, creating a playful rain of splashes.